Alcaraz and Juan Carlos Ferrero split up, and
we got two major splits within the sport. Tennis, man.
Carlos Alcaraz Gonzalez didn't just fire Juan Carlos Ferrero. He spent months orchestrating a calculated backroom humiliation to strip the legendary coach of his dignity and force him out the door. When a multi-million-dollar athletic asset is engineered from absolute scratch, the final battle isn't fought against an opponent across the net. It's fought behind closed doors, against a hyper-greedy family entourage. Now, Ferrero has finally exposed the toxic truth behind that abrupt exit, pulling back the curtain on the subtle, bitter clues the media desperately tried to ignore. Strip away the corporate PR immediately. The tennis world loves a wholesome narrative. They want you to believe that every elite player is backed by a perfectly synchronized team of loving family members and brilliant strategic minds. It's a carefully manufactured myth. Modern tennis isn't just a sport anymore, it's a brutal, high-stakes corporate land grab. When a teenager starts generating tens of millions of dollars in appearance fees, clothing contracts, and tournament winnings, the camp inevitably splits into two distinct, warring factions. On one side, you have the operational purist, the coach who demands absolute isolation, rigid discipline, and monastic sacrifice. On the other side, you have the patriarch, the bloodline that views the corporate entity as their personal family inheritance. This wasn't a mutual disagreement. This was an unadulterated territorial war for the soul and the checkbook of Carlos Alcaraz. Behind the scenes, the psychological shadows cast by both mentors dictated the friction. Alcaraz Gonzalez wasn't just a casual tennis dad watching from the stands. He was a highly competitive player in Spain back in the early 90s. He had the racket skill. He had the tactical instincts. What he lacked was the financial engine, the administrative backing, and the institutional luck required to break into the global elite. He tasted the bitter reality of being an outsider. He knew exactly how cold the tennis machine can be when you don't have a massive team pushing you forward. So when his own son began displaying a lightning-fast, generational instinct on the clay, the father made a silent vow. This time, the family would hold the keys to the kingdom. This time, no outsider would dictate the terms of their success. Enter Juan Carlos Ferrero. He wasn't just another traveling coach looking for a paycheck. Ferrero was tennis royalty, a former world number one, a French Open champion, a man who built his entire post-retirement legacy on his remote, ultra-strict Equilet Academy in Villena. Ferrero knew that reaching the absolute pinnacle of this sport requires an environment completely detached from comfort. When he took custody of a 15-year-old Carlos, he didn't train him near home. He insulated him, he cut out the noise. He became the surrogate father, the disciplinarian, the mental coach, and the tactical general. Ferrero controlled the diet, the sleep cycles, the biomechanical adjustments, and the psychological shielding. He built a machine from the ground up. And for the first few years, the system was flawless because the father deferred to the champion. Corporate success alters human gravity overnight. The moment Alcaraz started lifting Grand Slam trophies and secured the world number one ranking, the financial ecosystem around the camp mutated. The teenager from El Palmar was suddenly a global enterprise. We're talking Nike contracts, Rolex endorsements, massive multi-million-dollar appearance fees just to show up at 500-level tournaments. The financial stakes went from microscopic to astronomical, and that's exactly where the balance of power broke. The father was no longer content sitting in the player's box just clapping. He was the head of the bloodline. He saw an outsider controlling the daily schedule, the travel plans, and the career trajectory of his greatest asset. The patriarch wanted his territory back. He wanted the ecosystem to serve the family, not Ferrero's rigid academy structure. What happens when the daily friction of professional preparation begins to rot? Elite tennis is a game of microscopic margins. If a player's recovery schedule is thrown off by even 12 hours due to a corporate sponsor meeting or a family gathering, it shows up on the stat sheet the next week. Ferrero's entire training methodology was unyielding. He demanded predictable, unwavering structure. But by mid-2025, those exact routines were being continuously undermined. The family began pushing harder and harder to pull Carlos away from the isolation of the Villena Academy. They wanted him training closer to home, surrounded by his childhood friends and local influences. The media swallowed the wholesome narrative whole. The locker room knew it was a lie. Every tennis journalist ran the same copy-paste story. A young, grounded champion who just needs the emotional comfort of his hometown to avoid burnout. It sounds beautiful on a broadcast, but let's look at the operational reality. Every single week Carlos spent training away from Ferrero's academy was a week Ferrero lost absolute control over the athlete's environment. Decisions about commercial shoots, lifestyle choices, and daily recovery protocols were suddenly being intercepted by Alcaraz Gonzalez before they ever hit the coach's desk. Ferrero found himself trapped in a toxic dual reality. On the court, he was instructing a generational great who still listened to his every word. Off the court, he was being systematically managed out, reduced to an hourly employee by a father who wanted total administrative dominance. Locker room insiders began whispering about freezing cold interactions during the intense North American hard-court swing. The coach wanted absolute focus on tactical adjustments and physical preservation. The family entourage wanted more access, more inputs, and more control over the commercial schedule. When Alcaraz suffered unexpected early-round lapses in focus on court, Ferrero didn't blame the player. He knew the kid's mind was being pulled in 5 different directions by a domestic committee that didn't understand the psychological isolation required to stay at number 1. Ferrero wasn't just fighting opponents in the opposite box anymore, he was fighting a shadow coaching staff operating from the player's family suite. December 2025 brought the ultimate execution. The season was over, the trophies were on the mantle. Ferrero sat down and drafted the complete comprehensive blueprint for the upcoming calendar year. He mapped out the physical peak cycles, the exact tournament entry list, the rest periods, and the tactical overhauls needed to counter their rivals. He assumed the terms of his future with Carlos were set in stone, built on years of historic results and deep mutual affection. He was completely wrong. He wasn't met with a collaborative review, he was met with a cold, calculated corporate ambush. A brand new contract proposal was delivered to Ferrero by the Alcaraz family management apparatus. It didn't arrive with an invitation to talk. It arrived with a rigid, highly restricted, take it or leave it deadline. A blatant ultimatum. When Ferrero later broke his silence, his words were incredibly precise, heavily guarded, and absolutely devastating. He explicitly made sure the public knew that financial compensation was not the issue. He wasn't looking for more money. Instead, he dropped the real bomb. He stated there were specific clauses in that contract that had absolutely nothing to do with tennis. Read between the lines of high-level sports representation, and you can spot the ambush from a mile away. The document wasn't drafted to retain Juan Carlos Ferrero, it was explicitly engineered to humiliate him into walking away. It stripped him of his executive veto power over off-court scheduling. It slashed his authority regarding tournament selection. It forced him to accept a highly compromised training schedule that favored the family's local preferences over his academy's proven protocols. It essentially told a former world number 1 and the mastermind behind Alcaraz's rise that he was no longer the captain of the ship. He was being demoted to a traveling technical instructor, completely subservient to the patriarch's whims. Signing that paper would have meant surrendering his professional dignity and his legacy. It was checkmate. Ferrero chose his pride, rejected the humiliation, and walked out the door. The tennis media woke up to a sterile, heavily focus-grouped press release announcing the immediate termination of the most successful partnership of the modern era. No lawsuits were filed, no public insults were traded, but the silence spoke volumes. What we're looking at here is the ultimate tragic collision between 2 unyielding philosophies. Ferrero believed in the absolute pursuit of tennis perfection through isolation, discipline, and ironclad structure. The Alcaraz family believed in the absolute sovereignty of their bloodline, determined to fully possess the empire their son's talent had generated. Neither side was completely crazy, but in the brutal arena of global sports, a ship can only have one captain. Carlos Alcaraz continues to rewrite the record books with a restructured, family-approved camp. Juan Carlos Ferrero remains an elite, uncompromising mind working on his own terms. But as the seasons roll on and the pressure mounts, the haunting question will never leave the locker room. Did the camp just eliminate the one man who could guarantee Carlos's long-term survival? Or did a hyper-protective father just pull off the greatest executive coup in modern tennis history?